Hey, welcome to this month's Wake Up West Coast. I am so excited to be back here with you. I missed last month. I was out of town, and I have to say, I missed last month. I love being together with all of you and learning from our tremendous speakers. My name is Jody Ozarski. I have the privilege of being on the team at the West Coast Chamber, and whether you're here in person with us or joining us online, welcome. This morning, we are pleased to have a morning mingle sponsor with Old National Bank. Old National Bank has been a great partner for the Chamber and are here with us this morning. If you didn't already stop by their table in the lobby, please make sure that you do stop by and see Randy on your way out this morning. Would you join me in thanking Old National Bank? Speaking of great partners, we have a great partner in the Holland Board of Public Works. They've been a longtime sponsor of the Chamber and just great collaborators within the community. And this morning, I'm joined by Ted Seiler. They are our program sponsors today, and happy to have Ted here to help us learn a little bit more about what's happening in the world of the Holland BPW these days. So Ted, welcome.
Thank you.
So I know there's a lot going on at the BPW, but the fiber project is probably top of the list, especially for someone who lives in a place that there is no internet. So can you give us an update on what's happening with the fiber project?
Sure. So you know the BPW for 130 years that we've provided electric, water, wastewater services to the community. In August of 2022, the community said, hey, we want to have a fiber internet option in all of the city of Holland. So we said, okay, we're gonna do that. And the broadband folks said, hey, well, we chased the car, we caught the car, now what are we gonna do? So a lot has been going on the last couple years. We've hired a construction contractor to build the passings network. So the millage that was approved will be used to pay for a passings network that goes past every property in the city of Holland. And unfortunately for right now, it's just the city of Holland. And then we partnered.
Girl needs internet.
We've partnered with ITG Communications, and they are in town building the drops. So if you have an overhead electric service, you're likely to have an overhead drop for your fiber if you get fiber internet from us. And if you have an underground, you're probably going to have an underground service for fiber internet as well.
Fantastic. How far along are you in this process? When will this be completed?
Sure. So right now, the schedule looks for the passings network to completed in the spring, summer of 2026. And I know that seems like a long time for some folks that it might be on the back end of that. But our contractor with the passings has completed 4 fiber hoods is what we call them. So there's certain amount of customers that each electronics cabinet can support. And there's gonna be 15 of those fiber hoods in the city. They're done with 4, and if you're in one of those 4, you've probably been getting postcards or emails to say, hey, you can sign up. Call us, go to our website, and you'll see right on the banner, you can click on that, put in your address information, and express interest, and then we'll call you when it comes time to sign up.
So if people live in one of those fiber hoods, is that their only option for internet now, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we propose this in our building as an open access network so others can serve on that network. We've done that since the 90s, actually. We've partnered with iServe and 123. We are gonna be the provider right now for Holland City Fiber, but it doesn't mean you have to take our service. If you have a great deal, if you have a contract, you know, we've had questions, well, if I'm getting it for $20 a month, you know, is that okay? And we say, hey, if you got a great deal, you can keep that. You're gonna get 2 gigs from us for $45 a month, all in, equipment included, no setup fees, nothing like that. So it's a pretty good deal.
That's fantastic. So how's the community been responding? Are they taking you up on this offer?
Yeah, a lot of people really excited. Folks that have the service now, we've been really getting good high marks on our customer service and the process that they've been through, because it's new for us. Getting this many customers on board as quickly as going to be is new for us. We're going to go from 600 customers about is what we had to hopefully 8,000 or more in the next 3 or 4 years. So out in audience here, Pete Hoswell, who's our broadband services superintendent, and Bill Bedron, who's our broadband services supervisor. So if after you want to catch up with me or those 2 gentlemen, we can answer any questions you might
That's
have.
fantastic. Will you join me in thanking Ted and the team at the BPW?
Thank you.
Okay, so you know if you come to a chamber event, we're always going to work in some networking, and it's time now for that for you. And so here's what I'm going to ask you to do. At your table, if you can take a few minutes to get to know the people around you, you can share your name, your company, and then 'tis the season. What are you most thankful for at your organization this year? So you've got a few minutes. Go ahead and network with your table mates. I don't know about you, but I'm energized by hearing all the great things that people are thankful for in the work that they do. We talk all the time about the work that we get to do, not that we have to do. It's fun stuff. So, time for the main event, though. I am pleased to introduce our speaker this morning. Topsie VandenBosch is a psychological safety consultant, licensed psychotherapist, and founder of TVB Coaching. So what she does is combines her clinical expertise with leadership strategies to help organizations foster cultures where teams thrive, innovation grows, and burnout is reduced. Yes, please. We'll take all of those things. So will you please join me in welcoming today's speaker, Topsie VandenBosch.
Hi, everybody. How we doing today? Yay! So I'm so excited to be here. I'm going to be talking with you guys today all about how to escape the comparison trap through embracing your unique leadership journey. And I think that I want to start off with an honesty exercise. How many of you guys have ever been scrolling on social media and started, sorry?
We're losing your mic.
Oh, no.
Let's do this. I'm going to give you this.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, sounds good. How many of you guys have ever been scrolling on social media and started comparing yourself to strangers online? I'm gonna put my hand up first. I think that is so normal because oftentimes what happens is that we forget that what we're looking at is not the full picture. And what our brain likes to do is to subconsciously fill in the gaps. So we'll start to, even though we know that it's a highlight reel, we know that it's not the full story, it's really easy to start to fill in the gaps and start to assume that we know things about people that we actually don't. And so what ends up happening is that before you know it, what started off as a really good day ends up turning to trash really, really quickly. I can't be the only person that has ever experienced that, because that sucks when it does happen. And so I want to really talk about how when we are seeing snapshots of other people's achievements and what other people have going on, all of a sudden we're not as content as what we were in the moment. And that's really the heart of what I want to talk about today, is how you guys can access your contentment. How many of you guys feel content right now with where you are at in your career? And it's okay if that's not where you are at currently, but I think that contentment is a skill. It's not only an emotion, but it's a skill that we have to cultivate. Because I think that we forget that contentment does not come easy to all of us. And in order to access it, you have to be willing to really look at the areas of your life that you tend to compare yourself to other people, where you tend to forget just how blessed you are to have the journey that you are on, to have the career that you have, to have had the opportunities that you have. And the way that you can access that at any time is to understand what the core fears are and the core beliefs are that really drive you to remain in the comparison trap and have a really difficult time embracing your unique journey. And I also want to say something. I want to say that a lot of the time we end up forgetting that comparison is not only the thief of joy, it is also the thief of contentment. And when you can't access your joy, it makes it really difficult to access your contentment. And through the work that I do with organizations, with individuals, even in my therapy practice, I really believe that the reason why we get caught in the comparison trap boils down to these three core fears. Number one, we fear that we are not worthy of success. And what does this mean? worthiness is really deep, and sometimes we don't realize that we don't feel worthy until we are doom scrolling on TikTok at 2 o'clock in the morning. I can't be the only person that's ever done that, feeling like, oh my gosh, all of these people all over the world are doing really cool things that I never thought was possible, and now all of a sudden, I'm not feeling as successful as I thought that I was, or I'm not feeling as content that I thought that I was. And a lot of the time, other people's highlight reels make you reflect and pay attention to what are the areas of my life that I don't feel quite settled in, and where are the areas of my life where I feel like I am underperforming. And so when we don't believe that we are worthy of the success that's divinely ours, it makes it so much more likely that we are going to remain in that seat of comparison and really feel inadequate when you are comparing yourself to other people's journey. The second core fear that I truly believe causes for us to remain in the comparison trap is the fear that we are missing out on something. So when I think about missing out on something, how many of you guys ever experienced FOMO? I am the FOMO queen. I feel FOMO about things that I didn't even want to attend. But it's, right? I'll tell a friend, oh, I don't want to go to that. And then all of a sudden I'm like, but why didn't you invite me? I don't really understand. I didn't want to go, but I don't like that feeling of missing out. How many of you guys have ever realized that your friends have a separate group chat than the one that you're a part of? That's dark. It's really dark when you realize that they have another group chat that you aren't a part of. It's like the worst feeling ever. You're like, you're not even really my friends. Why would you exclude me? We don't like to feel that we're missing out on anything. And when we're talking specifically in terms of our leadership and our careers, sometimes what can come up when we're comparing ourselves to others is that we fear that we don't have all of the tools and the answers that could really set us up for success. We fear that someone else has cracked the code to success, and we're standing on the sidelines, not being able to access the same amount of opportunities as someone else, and that is difficult. And so sometimes that core fear shows up as we're scrolling. It happens subconsciously, but we're feeling like, how come she's able to be in Bali on a laptop, working remotely, in her bikini, and I'm here with all of my kids. I have a great career, but all of a sudden, I'm just kind of feeling like she figured out something that I didn't. How many of you guys have ever experienced that? I can't be the only person that has. And so we fear that we're missing out on something. We fear that someone else has cracked the code and that we weren't given those digits. We weren't given it. We didn't have the same opportunities. We didn't have the same abilities. We didn't have the same connections. And number 3, we fear that deep down that we're not enough. And that's super deep. And the fear of not being enough, and the fear of not being smart enough, not being accomplished enough, not being connected enough. I remember that was something that I struggled with for a while. I don't know if any of you guys have ever struggled with that, but the feeling that other people have connections that you don't, and that's why they are where they are in their career and you're not. Right? So the fear that we're not enough, we're not smart enough, we're not accomplished enough, we haven't achieved enough, we're not witty enough, we're not pretty enough, we're not creative enough. Those feelings really fuel this fear that, oh my gosh, what if everyone else has gotten something figured out that I don't? And so the 3 core fears, the fear that we're not worthy of success, the fear that you're missing out on something, and the fear that deep down you're not enough, those core fears can really keep you stuck in the comparison trap, and they can fully prevent you from being able to embrace your unique leadership journey. And so today, what I'm gonna do is we're gonna talk about the core ways to escape the comparison trap and embrace the unique path that is divinely yours. And I'm gonna start with my story. And I hope that what you realize in my story is that the more you compare, the less you are aware of your own brilliance. The more you compare, the less you are aware of your own brilliance. And in the age of social media, where the wins are loud, but The losses are quiet. It is so easy to forget that. And it's so easy to compare your success to other people in your career and feel inadequate by comparison. So we'll scroll through the highlight reels, and all of a sudden you're feeling like, why am I not there yet? Why are they able to achieve this and have this outcome and have these accomplishments and I don't? And I know how this feels because it happened to me. So let's talk about my journey through the comparison trap, because I like to lead by example. So this photo is brought to you by Topsie, thinking that when she decided to work for herself, she was gonna commemorate it with hiring her photographer to do a glamour shoot. So you know how most people, when they start their own businesses, they have an LLC, they do all those things. No. I'm very vain, I'm very conceited. And I was like, I'm gonna hire my wedding photographer to take glamour shots of me. So it's quite embarrassing, but that's what I did. This was in circa 2017, I think. And so I started off in the corporate world, like many of you. I've been a therapist since 2011, graduated from Michigan State, go green, go white. And I worked as a case manager in Flint. I have worked with the youth in residential treatment facilities. I've worked for the hospital system. And then I ended up having a really traumatic experience working at the prison. And then after that, that's when I decided, oh my gosh, I think I want to work for myself. I think I want to be a therapist. And so I ended up starting my own private practice, and it was super cool, super awesome. And I did that for some years, but after a while, I started to feel like, okay, this is cool, and I love the impact that I have, but I really do feel like there's more out there for me. How many of you guys have ever had that moment in your career where you're like, what I'm doing is awesome, but I could be doing more, I think. And so I didn't quite know how to make this happen, but I knew I wanted to speak on stages, and I knew I wanted to be a corporate consultant, a coach. I started scrolling social media, and I started realizing, like, oh my gosh, like there's so many different ways that I could leverage my skills. There's so many different ways that I can help and support people. But something really interesting happened, and that is, I felt like I didn't have anyone else around me that was doing what it is that I wanted to do. And so I ended up feeling very isolated and alone. How many of you guys have ever felt like that in your career paths, where you're kind of like, what I'm doing is not what I see a lot of other people doing. I'm not quite sure what this pathway is to get to where I know it is that I'm meant to go. And so I truly feel like this is where comparison really was able to grab a hold of me, because I was so focused on being able to be surrounded by other clinicians that also wanted to do speaking and that also wanted to do consulting. And so oftentimes I felt isolated and misunderstood. This picture, actually, and the picture before it, this is from my first speaking engagement. It was at this event called GR Boss Babes. It was in Grand Rapids, and I was paid $200, and it was such a big deal. And I read from a script the whole time. Yeah, I was horrified, but I did it anyways. I was horrified. I will never look at the videos from that, but I did it. But I remember thinking, you know, the really sad part is I remember going home and being like, I crushed it. And now looking back, and I'm like, no, you did not crush it, honey. You didn't crush it at all. But I just really admire that Topsie that just said, forget it, I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna read from a script on stage where I'm being paid, and this is gonna be great. And I just sometimes wanna access that fearlessness again. And so anyways, at this point in time, I knew I wanted to speak. I was starting to get my feet wet and starting to speak a little bit, but I often felt isolated and misunderstood. And even with how alone I felt in my leadership journey, what I wish someone would have told me is that someone else's journey is not a blueprint for your own. Because what was happening was that I was scrolling social media looking for other therapists that were doing what I was doing, and I felt like the success that they had found, maybe that was going to be my path as well. And what's so interesting is that I realized that favor isn't fair, right? Like other people's journey and other people's success is probably not gonna be yours. Yours is gonna look different. It's gonna be better because it's yours. Are you guys feeling me? It's gonna be better because it's yours. So that's what I wish someone would have told me back then, is that someone else's journey is not a blueprint for your own. And so I ended up taking the leap and figuring out how to get into the world of coaching. I did it. I created group coaching programs. I served clients from all over the world, created digital courses, launched my own podcast called Crush the Mindset Spiral. And I was speaking on stages, and I was just doing it. And so from the forefront, it probably looked like I was killing it. It probably looked like I had everything I had ever wanted, but that actually was not true. I was actually still feeling inadequate. A lot of people didn't know that, though. And I was eventually able to close the doors to my therapy practice, and so I was able to go into coaching and consulting full-time. But even with all of the success, I still found myself comparing my journey to other people in my field. And so the comparison trap hit hard. And on social media, I would see my colleagues landing big clients and getting brand deals and reaching milestones that, for me, I just was like, how can I have that? I didn't even want brand deals, guys. I don't want brand deals. But it sounded good, right? Because when you're looking at other people's journey and when you're trying to figure out your own path, it's really easy to forget your own values. It's really easy to forget that your path is uniquely yours, and if you just stay the course, you're going to see the success that you want. And it felt like, I remember having this feeling, it felt like other people with less experience had found success a lot easier than I felt like I deserved. How many of you guys have ever felt like that? And we could be honest in here, especially when it comes to now, with things moving so fast, with the rise of AI and Gen Z, and like, people are getting opportunities that for many of us, you would never have been able to do so early on in your career, right? And sometimes that can feel like, man, I had to work however many years to retire early, and now you got so many people on TikTok trying to retire by the age of 30, right? Like I follow a lot of TikTok creators that they're able to retire super early. And I think that it can become easy to look at people like that and feel like, man, like they've got it figured out and I'm just still here chugging along. And so I remember thinking to myself, what am I missing? Why am I not where I really want to be? And I wish someone back then would have told me someone else's journey is not a blueprint for your own, Topsie. Because if I'm really being honest, it felt like I was always one step behind. And what I was doing was I was measuring my success against other people who had been in the game longer than me. And I felt entitled to it. If I'm being honest, I felt entitled to it. And so what ended up happening, despite experiencing my own version of success, this was my first workshop. I held it in Grand Haven. I taught therapists how to open their first private practice. I think that was like circa 2018. And I remember 8 people purchased, and it was $250, and I taught them how to open their own therapy practice, and I was like, yes, I've made it. People paid me. But even with that, I still started disqualifying myself from the room. And what's the room? The room is opportunities. I started feeling like I'm not smart enough, I'm not educated enough, I'm not experienced enough, I don't have enough accolades, I'm not old enough, right? And so I remember when a friend brought it to my attention, and it caused me to realize that the trap of comparison would sabotage every good thing in my career if I kept allowing it to dictate my happiness and my contentment. So here are the core beliefs that really caused for me to remain in the comparison trap. Number 1, I always felt like I was one step behind everyone else. And so what did that look like? How did that manifest? Well, I started comparing my success against the success of others who were around me. I also started really holding myself to this impossible timeline of success. And so I would constantly feel like I was behind when I was exactly where I needed to be. I also felt like other people's milestones were also benchmarks that I should be hitting in my career. The second core belief that really caused for me to remain in the comparison trap and have difficulty embracing my unique journey is that I always felt like I was running out of time. How many of you guys ever, I call it time scarcity. How many of you guys have ever struggled with time scarcity in your career? Where you're like, okay, by this stage, I want to be doing this. By this mile marker, I want to be doing this. You guys, that's all made up. We make that stuff up, right? But it's a way that perhaps we use to keep motivated and to keep progressing. I have a feeling that we have a room of some high achievers. Are there any high achievers in here? Oh, so you're the only one that's gonna be honest, Hannah back there. I'm definitely a high achiever. I love to crush goals. It makes me come alive. But at the same time, it also caused for me to feel like I was constantly behind everyone else. It also caused for me to feel like I wasn't where I needed to be, and I felt as if I was really behind the curve and there was more that I could be doing. So it really created this sense of not enoughness. I always felt this anxiousness, this urgency. And the sneaky thing about feeling like you're running out of time in your career is it can make you feel like everything is urgent when really nothing is. It makes you feel like everything is urgent when really nothing is. The third core belief that really caused for me to remain in the comparison trap was I actually didn't believe that my accomplishments were that cool. I didn't really believe in the value of my accomplishments. Whereas other people from the outside looking in probably looked at me and were like, oh, you got hired to do this, you got hired to do that. And I'm like, yeah, it's really not that cool though. There's more I could be doing. If only you knew what I had to do to get that. Right? And so I would discount my success. I discounted my success a lot. And so I didn't believe in the value of my accomplishments. What I also would do is I also felt like there was more that I could have been achieving. And then what I also would do is I also felt like my accomplishments were just not that big of a deal. It's like if I can do it, anyone can do it, which is true, but for me, what was sneaky about that is that I actually wasn't allowing myself to truly feel how amazing and how blessed I was to have had the opportunities that I had. And so when you look at these three core beliefs that really drove the comparison that I was in, it's no wonder that I ended up on social media comparing my journey to strangers online. And actually, not everyone was a stranger. Some people I actually knew in real life. And the truth is that the more you compare, the less you are aware of your own brilliance. The more you compare, the less you are aware of your own brilliance. And so I came to a realization, at some point something had to give, and I came to this realization that shifted everything for me. And that was that if I didn't let go of comparison and truly embrace my unique journey, then what would happen is that I would constantly feel like I was falling short and that all of my accomplishments were not good enough. And comparison was truly holding me back from being able to fully own my path and appreciate how unique and how needed and how necessary my own journey was in contributing to my overall success. And so how did I break free from the comparison trap? I had to focus on creating new metrics of success. This was actually my first retreat. It was for moms who were CEOs. I'm not a mom, and this was such a big deal that they trusted me. And I helped them really access skills and tools to help them cope with mom guilt. That was the whole purpose of the retreat, and it was in Orlando, Florida. It was a luxury. I'm bougie, I'm not gonna lie. Clearly, you could probably tell from my outfit, I'm bougie. I'm bougie, okay? They were like, can I choose my roommate at the house? Roommate? You guys are all having your own rooms. Y'all ain't going there to bunk with anybody. What are we, 12? You're gonna have your own bathroom. You're gonna have your own room. You're gonna have a private chef. You're gonna have a private bartender. It was all inclusive. I think they paid like $6K, and it was a blast. It was so much fun. These CEO moms were incredible. But again, I had to create new metrics of success and really focus on my own path and my journey and the way that I felt like I was supposed to serve the world. And so what did this mean? It meant that I needed to focus on the impact that my work had had over crushing the goals that I had. And so I had to focus on what is the impact of my work, right? How do people feel when they leave working with me? What does the audience feel when I go and when I speak to these crowds? It can't just be about money. It can't just be about how many goals I crushed and how many accolades I achieved. All of that is great, but it never made me feel whole. And so I had to create new metrics of success that were non-fiscal related, non-financial related, and that were truly based on, I call it soft ROI. So there's hard ROI, which is the data, the numbers, and there's soft ROI, which is where you start to really pay attention to how people feel when they are in your presence, how they feel as a result from the impact of your work. I'm dead. I love that sign. And so impact over goals. So I had to focus on what my impact over my goals were. Growth over perfection. What are some of the ways in which I had grown? What are the skills that I had developed? What are the strengths that I had? What did I learn? What did my professional development look like? Do y'all see what I'm talking about? You have to create new metrics of success that really allow for you to feel the blessings that have been bestowed on you and how your work is impacting others around you. And then I had to focus on the depth of connections, because sometimes what can happen in the pursuit of our goals is we can start to have these transactional relationships with people without realizing it. And so for me, that looked like me looking at what are the depths of the connections that I have been able to create rather than what the outcome of those connections are. So what types of relationships am I building and developing with people over what can I get from people? Do y'all feel that energy shift? Because when you operate from this perspective of what can I get from you? What am I getting from this relationship? It really causes for you to have a transactional relationship with success and with the relationships that you build in your career. And then I also had to stop treating my accomplishments like they had an expiration date, because that keeps you in the comparison trap. So a lot of us, when we accomplish things, I have been guilty of this. This is something I have to actively work on. It almost feels like it no longer counts. Like you did it a year ago, maybe 5 years ago, and then you stop talking about it. Why do we do that? It's so weird, because it will always matter. Your work always matters. It doesn't have an expiration date. It doesn't have a shelf life. You can at any time access that feeling that you had when you had that achievement. But I think oftentimes what we do is we discount it, especially if we feel like it's been a while that we've had that type of win or that we've had that type of achievement, right? So you have to stop treating your accomplishments like they have an expiration date, because they don't. They will always matter. I had to celebrate the impact that my achievements had, right? So fast forward 3 years from the last time I was able to, maybe get hired for that speaking gig. How are people doing now? How are those people in the audience? What do their lives look like? And people still reach out to me from speaking gigs that I had like 5 years ago when I'm reading from a script. And they're like, I remember this one thing that you said. And so you have to look at the lasting impact of the work that you do. Then I also had to recognize timing. Timing is everything in life. And the more that I realized that if this wouldn't have happened and if that wouldn't have happened, then I wouldn't have been able to experience this outcome, this achievement. You start to see these synchronicities, and you start to see how things had to unfold the way that they unfolded for you to experience the outcome that you are experiencing now. Does that make sense, y'all? And this video won't play, but I also, in order to believe in the value of my accomplishments, I had to keep a success journal. So that means that I forced myself to write in a journal once a week, and I would reflect on what are those things that I have accomplished that I am just so proud of. What are the wins that I accomplished this week? Both hard ROI, soft ROI. What are those things that I'm proud of that no one else is going to applaud me for, that no one else is going to congratulate me for, right? And it could be something as simple, especially if you're a professional that struggles with anxiety or depression. It could be something as simple as, I didn't have a panic attack this week, right? A lot of people aren't gonna give you a pat on the back because you're probably not telling a whole lot of people. But those types of things matter. Stop rushing to the next goal. That's the next thing that I had to do, is to allow yourself to feel the satisfaction of your achievements. So the way that I actively do this now is after the speaking gig, I don't have another one for at least 2 months because I need to just sit in this. I need to allow myself to recover. I need to reflect and think about what I could have done better. Does that make sense, guys? And then I also had to revisit client testimonials, and that's the most awkward part for me, because although I'm quite vain, and although I think I'm hot, I also have a really tough time getting, I'm just being honest, I have a really tough time receiving compliments from others. I actually start to get hot. Does anyone else get hot? I start, especially if they're just like talking straight to me and they're like going on and on, I have a really tough time receiving. So I had to be willing to look back at client videos, to emails that people have sent me, right? And I created a hype me up folder. That's what I call it. Whenever I need to be hyped up, I create this folder and I go and read all of the amazing stuff that people have said. And by confronting these limiting beliefs that were causing me to compare myself to others, I was able to let go of comparison and start trusting in my unique journey. And the less I compared, the more I was aware of my own brilliance. So I just shared how I escaped the comparison trap and the core beliefs that held me back. But I want to focus on you and focus on some of the other core beliefs that are really causing for some of you in this room to remain in the comparison trap. Because what I struggled with is not unique to me. So, the 4 core beliefs that could be keeping some of you guys in the comparison trap is, number 1, you don't truly know what makes you different. And when you don't know what makes you different, you make the mistake of allowing other people to tell you what makes you different, which is not a bad thing, but what can happen is that you probably don't trust that. And so you need to innately know what makes you unique, what makes you special, what makes you the best fit for the job, whether it's a promotion, whether it's you're trying to move up the ladder in your company, whether it's you're looking for another job, right? A lot of the time people tend to clam up during the interview about why would you be a great asset to this organization. And I really want to help you guys understand how to unlock what truly makes you unique and makes you special. The next core belief that keeps many of you stuck in the comparison trap is that your value and what you feel about yourself fluctuates depending on who sees you. So when your value fluctuates based on other people's perception of you, you're always going to feel at the mercy of others and at the mercy of their recognition. And you have to recognize yourself first. Number 3, you believe someone else's success maybe somehow diminishes your own. For some people, they get very discouraged when they see other people accomplishing things that they've always wanted or that's on their goal list because they feel like, well, they're already doing that. There's no room for me. And that's not true. And number 4, you disqualify yourself from the room before you even walk in. So for some people, and for many of you in this room, perhaps you have not gone for promotions that you were very qualified for because you felt like, well, I don't have as much experience as this person, and so what's gonna make them hire me over them? How many of you guys have ever been guilty of that in any area of your career? Yeah. And it's very insidious because we don't often realize that that's what's happening. But these beliefs that you might have, these core beliefs that you have, they don't have to define you. They're just stories that we tell ourselves, and stories can be rewritten. Because when you don't confront these negative core beliefs and you don't challenge them, it spreads like a weed and it affects everything that it touches. And so let's talk about the 5 practical mindset shifts and strategies that will allow for you to release comparison, embrace your path, and feel contentment in your journey. Because the less you compare, the more you are aware of your own brilliance. And so how to know what makes you unique? You have to identify your own onlyness factor. What are the things that people have told you about yourself, about the way that you see things, about the way that you contextualize things. Maybe you're a mathy person. I call the math people mathy, because I'm not mathy. I don't even do fractions. So what are those things? I don't even divide. Like what? Calculator, please. So what is your onlyness factor? What are the things that other people have told you that I don't know how you think that way, but you do it, and I appreciate that about you. You have to really dig deep and figure out what are those things that you bring to the room that you notice a lot of people don't. I was telling my husband the other day that he's a very detail-oriented person, and that's why he's the best person for the job that he has. And he's realized that for himself, that that's a gift that he has that not a lot of people have. And then you also have to define your values, because when you know what your values are, it's gonna make it really difficult for you to compare your goals to anyone else's. So when you define your values, you build your goals off of them. So that means when you're scrolling on socials and you're seeing someone live a life that you really desire, you are gonna be less likely to compare, because you're gonna understand that, well, my values don't really align with that. Living in Bali, laptop lifestyle, working remotely is gonna take me away from being close to my family, perhaps in West Michigan. And so when you're able to really rethink your goals in a comparison with what your values are, is going to help you not remain in that comparison trap for very long. I'm not gonna tell you that you're never gonna compare, but what I am gonna tell you is you're gonna know how to access your contentment. Make sense, guys? And then lastly, align your goals that you are creating with the strengths that you have. Build on top of the strengths that you have. A lot of the time, some of the reasons why our confidence plummets is because we are not being strategic with the goals that we have and with building upon our natural strengths. The next core to belief, how do you feel secure in your achievements? You have to practice on building internal validation. What does internal validation mean? It means that you are validating yourself and not making that someone else's job. It is no one else's job to validate you except for you. So practice self-recognition. That means recognizing yourself for those things that other people are not gonna know about you. They're not gonna know that you're struggling with that. They're not gonna know that you were able to achieve that goal. They're not gonna raise their hands and applaud you. You have to be the person to applaud yourself. So how are you going to create self-recognition and make it this normal part of your weekly journey in your career? And you have to set boundaries around seeking external validation, right? So sometimes what we can get caught up on are things that really don't matter, but in the moment it feels like it does. So on LinkedIn, right, don't worry about who shared your post or who liked your post or who's watching your stories and who's not commenting on your stories or whatever that external validation might look like. Even with your partner, with your partner, although they love us, they don't need to be our everything, right? And so how do you set boundaries around not depending on other people to see you more than you see yourself? Make sense? And then thirdly, how to stop being intimidated by other people's success. You have to release your timelines. We've got to release the timeline of feeling like if you don't accomplish something by a certain age or a certain date, that you're behind. You are not. You are exactly where you need to be. You also need to recognize the skills and the experiences that brought you to the success that you have. So when you look at everything as being connected, when you look at your unique leadership journey as being divine and being divinely orchestrated, it really makes it magical, and it allows for you to truly see how if that didn't happen, then I wouldn't have gotten this opportunity, and then this wouldn't have happened either. I'll tell you a really quick synchronicity is that Hannah, who I connected with, she heard me speak in another session with another Chamber of Commerce, and that wouldn't have happened. This wouldn't have happened if she wouldn't have heard me speak there. Do you guys see what I'm saying? You have to look back and see how everything is connected and everything happened divinely. And then lastly, envy. So comparison is just envy in a different dress. That's what I like to say. And I really want for you guys to view envy as just the reminder of dreams and goals that you haven't actualized yet. Sometimes what envy is showing you that you actually want more than what you're being honest with yourself about. And so that's where I think it's really important to really look at, wow, I didn't even realize that was something that would bother me so much. What is it about that bothers me? Is it because I want that? And does that align with my values and my goals. So I really want for you guys, when you notice that feeling of envy come up, really think about, is this evidence of things that I actually want, but I've been afraid to say, or been afraid to admit to myself? And then lastly, how to stop disqualifying yourself from opportunities that you are meant to have. You have to challenge the stories that you tell yourself. You are just as qualified as anyone else. Your journey may not look like the other person's, but that's the whole point. And then lastly, focus on what you have accomplished and not so much on what you haven't accomplished. Because when you spend all that time focusing on what you haven't accomplished, it's no wonder that you constantly feel like you're not enough and that you're not doing enough. Because the less that you compare, the more that you'll be aware of your own brilliance. So I want to recap really quick the 4 strategies for escaping the comparison trap. Know what makes you unique. What's your onlyness factor? Build a strong sense of internal validation. Practice self-recognition. Release the self-imposed timelines that you've created for yourself. And claim your right to be in the room, y'all. You belong in the room. So if you wouldn't sign up for someone else's struggles, this is something that I want you to be thinking about as you scroll social media and as you start to find yourself perhaps starting to envy and feeling comparison to other people. If you wouldn't sign up for their struggles, then why are you envious of their destiny? A lot of the time we don't think about that. We don't think about what they had to experience or go through in order to get to where they are. And that's what I like to tell people is if you wouldn't sign up for the struggles that they had, then why in the world are you envious of what their destiny is? Your journey is always unfolding in its own time, and you'll never be too late for your appointment with destiny. Thank you so much for having me.
Topsie, thank you. You've given us so much to think about this morning, so I appreciate that you're here and that you're challenging us in that way. Thank you. Thank you also to Old National Bank and their sponsorship this morning. Would you join me in thanking Old National Bank one more time? And thank you as well to the team at the Holland BPW for all that you do, including being sponsors for us here today. Thank you, BPW. So a couple of announcements before we wrap things up. We've got a little bit of a shift in the next 2 months for Wake Up West Coast. Next month, we'll be back here, but on a different date. Next month is it's breakfast with our congressman. And because that we're having Congressman Huizenga come in from DC, that needs to be on a Monday. So don't show up on Tuesday morning. It will be lonely and there will be no bacon. So make sure that you're here with us on December 2 to hear updates. I know there's nothing going on in DC these days, right? So it'll be very interesting to get updates from our congressman. And then on January 14, we're back to Tuesdays, but we will not be here. We will be back to Getty Church, where we will have our economic forecast with Dr. Paul Isley. Hopefully you received a survey in our weekly and had taken the opportunity to complete that for him. The data that you provide helps him create really hyper-local data about our economy and what you can expect in the year ahead. So I'm sure we'll resend that again. Is that true, Hannah? We will resend that again if you didn't already complete that survey. But I hope that you'll complete that and then come join us on Tuesday morning, January 14 at Getty Church. So with that, I'll thank you for joining us today. Go and make it a remarkable day.